Welcome back to another episode of Media Talks TV with your host, Tony J. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button, click the like, hit the notification bell because we got more videos coming up. We want to talk about some discussions what happening in the media, and we'll talk about this whole thing with Obama. You know, how do I start this off? Everybody has watched the video clip. I'm not going to show it here because I don't think it needs to be shown. You can go look on YouTube, you can go look on Twitter. It's there. But of course, I think this is one of the most contested elections that we've had this year because, well, for lack of a better term, we have a candidate who's only done 3 months of campaigning. And in the span of 3 months, she's gotten this popularity, right? This has never been done in the history of presidential elections. And what I realize is because this is a different type of election, never has there been in history where somebody has switched out a Democratic candidate that quick and become so popular without going through the primary process that most candidates go through. President of the United States, the incumbent, is on the ballot. It takes a lot of money to switch the candidates on the ballots before the election day. And what I've noticed is the Democratic Party has a crisis on its hands. People who were once hardcore Democrats have gone to the middle. Then you got the younger group who, you know, have gone to the far left, right? So they represent a new type of Democratic Party that we probably won't see until maybe 20, 2040. So you got those young Democrats and you got the older guard. And what I mean by the old guard, those Clinton Democrats, those ones that are always very staunchly moderate and what we call neo neoliberals, which are basically corporate Democrats that they they represent special interest groups within the private sector. Most of their donor money comes from celebrities and corporations, say like Bloomberg or Microsoft, people like Tim Cook. Those are the old guard of the Democratic Party. You know, your James Carville type Democrats. So you have this generational divide going on within this campaign. Some younger people are for Kamala Harris. The other people, they're kind of midway, but they're definitely not. followers of the Republican Party. But I don't see a vast difference between both Trump and Kamala Harris in the sense that Kamala is somebody that really she would be considered a neocon. In the 80s, you had what you call Reagan Democrats, which is a part of the old guard. She would be somebody like that. But we never seen somebody like Kamala Harris, but we've known people like Kamala Harris in the past. And what's going on right now is you have a Democratic Party that isn't speaking to the type of demographic that they want to target, right? And with Obama making the statements that he's made just this week, we're further alienating a base that is the most important base, and that is the black male vote. And I can't stress that enough. I can't say that enough because what former President Obama said, the tone and the message might push more black men to go Republican. Now, I myself, I did not vote in this election for various reasons. I voted a third party. I voted Jill Stein. And the reason why I voted for Jill Stein is because I couldn't bring myself to vote for Kamala Harris. And there's reasons behind that. One of the things that I noticed about Democrats is Democrats like to preach, sit on these moral platitudes, and talk down and lecture their voters. And what do I mean by that? It's been a bad habit, but it's starting to become something that is indicative of this political party. The fact that we're using the ideological representation to place people in boxes and then to say, well, vote for me, don't vote for the other guy. I'm for you. I'm fighting for you. That's essentially what the Democratic Party has continued to do. They don't look at people as, well, we're human, but we're boxes of ideological representation. So what I mean by in the media, we have what we call these ideological representations is you got the feminists, the LGBTQ, the social activists, which are your younger people, and then you put them all in a box and they say, well, we're the party of inclusion. We're for immigration. We're for abortion. All these isms. And this is what's really one of the main reasons why there's such a disenchantment in the party. And a lot of people are abandoning Democrats because of this. And I don't think Obama understands this. I don't think Kamala Harris understands this. because at the end of the day, we're a part of a system that really doesn't provide anything for its constituents that they represent. So when you think about at the top of the ticket, most of the time you're not thinking about what's going on at the bottom of the ticket. Now, some of you out there are saying, well, what do you mean? And what I mean, and I'm going to break it down for you. We're so worried about the presidency, but we're not worried about who represents us in our local governments. People that we vote in year after year after year and don't deliver on the promises that they say they're going to deliver on. Now, I'm from Baltimore, and some of you might be from Chicago, some of you might be from New York, Los Angeles. And you notice in these major cities where we have all these elected leaders that we've had for 20, 30, 40 years, we see every time they turn around, they come knocking on our doors. They have the community organizers coming in. They shove leaflets in our fucking mailboxes. And then year after year, we get disenchanted and they don't deliver on anything that they say they were going to deliver on. They don't talk with the people that they represent. They don't talk with their elected representatives. We have people in our neighborhoods that, you know, we don't really engage with. And many of these elected leaders at the bottom part of the ticket, we don't even think about those people. We're not on the offense when they ask for our votes and they get elected, or we bring them back in every 2 years. And the worst of it is that they don't have term limits. And to bring all of this back to what Obama has said, the Democratic Party has a very big problem. Now, the video that you saw online where President Obama is, campaigning in Pittsburgh, where he's talking to the brothers. This is another attempt to denigrate Black men because they feel like they think you don't have any authority over your vote, that you can be brought, that you can be pushed to or compelled to vote for a specific candidate. And what Obama said, well, this is somebody that is looking to whip up votes. I don't agree with his messaging and what he said. I don't like the approach. And as many would say, shaming and scolding are the worst things to do to get votes. You don't get votes using scare tactics. And I don't understand why Kamala Harris and former President Obama doesn't understand this shit. You go out and you say, well, don't vote because democracy is on, that Trump is going to dismantle the Constitution. That's what he wants. He's a dictator. But you haven't even led with the accomplishments of your own administration. And I feel like the biggest problem with the Democratic Party is that you don't offer your constituencies tangibles because you don't feel like you have to. It's kind of like the equivalent of a man being in a relationship with a woman and he gets sex every night, right? But he don't do nothing for his woman. But they feel like, well, as long as I bring her flowers every Valentine's Day, then she'll still keep giving me sex. That's exactly what the Democratic Party is all about. And that's exactly what they do to us as constituencies and also as black men. I mean, really think about this for a minute. We vote every 4 years for the Democrats, and we've continued to vote every 4 years for Democrats. But the biggest problem is that they never get critiqued on some of the shit that they do to black men. Every single person has a equal representation in the Democratic Party. Black women, white women, Asians, Latinos, gays. But then where's the platform for black men, right? And every time you ask for it, you have people like Roland Martin talk about, particular legislative bills that the Democrats have passed that, you have to participate in your vote matters, and you have to get out there and vote. You can't sit on the sidelines complaining. You hear this shit all the time. But you don't hear the Democrats trying to campaign for African American men. And that's one of the problems that I have with somebody like Obama saying what he said to a group of young black men, because there was nobody else around it. It was a group of young black men, and he's sitting there, he's talking about the brothers. Since when has President Obama used the word the brothers? You know? And then he said something along, cousin Pookie might be the one sitting out not voting for Kamala Harris. Like he said something like that along the line. I mean, you watch the video again. Who refers to somebody as an example of a cousin Pookie? That's even insulting, to say the least, because Obama never really grew up like you and me. That man grew up around palm trees and fucking beaches. He never grew up in the projects. He never grew up around some bad neighborhoods where he had to dodge fucking bullets. He never had to stay out of the window because people were shooting in the neighborhood. This is the stuff that I'm talking about. And these people say they represent us. But when I heard President Obama say what he said to those group of men, and I'm sitting up there and saying to myself, Who the hell does this guy think he is to come and denigrate a group of men, sit up there and tell them, oh, that's what being a real man is, to put another woman down and raise yourself up? All because you want your candidate that you endorse to win. And this isn't the first time President Obama, former President Obama, has said the shit that he said to black men. Because I can remember very vividly. I mean, let's go back for a minute. I want you to go back for a minute. There was a Father's Day speech that he gave in 2011. I remember it was Father's Day. And I remember President Obama said something along the lines that black men need to take care of their kids. I remember that was a speech that he made, but it was all about himself. And I think one of the biggest problems with the Obama presidency that we don't talk about very often, because well, he said the quiet part out loud. Everybody in the news media said he said the quiet part out loud when it came to black men. But I'm going to go as far to say the quiet part out loud with his presidency that we never really talk about. And that is the fact that we as black men treated Obama like he was a messiah, that he was a godlike figure. And I think there was problems with that. And before I jump into this, I want to bring it back to the core message of what I'm about to say, because I know a lot of people have a problem with what he said. I don't know if you have a problem with what he said, but you should. And that's for various reasons, because this isn't the first time that former President Obama has made certain statements maligning black men, but we don't talk about it because there isn't a space for us to talk about it. But we're going to have my space here to speak on it, because for years, Obama has never gotten any pushback about the weaknesses in his presidency. And, you know, I feel like it's time to really push back on that, push back on that notion. A lot of people don't want to criticize Obama because he's the first black president. But it doesn't matter if you're the first of anything. Really, to be honest, the first is always the ones that get the biggest amount of criticism. They get picked apart. But we as black folks, we don't pick apart Obama for a lot of reasons, because we've leveled him up there to a sacred cow on the same level as a Dr. King and a Abraham Lincoln and shit. And that's always been a problem with me. You know, when we are not critical of the people, that the leaders that we follow, we're going to always have problems. If you can't criticize any of your leaders, then they should not be your leaders. if you can't be a critic and if they can't take criticism. Same thing when we talk about, the difference between Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X in a sense. The minute Malcolm criticized Elijah Muhammad, people wanted to go up against him because Malcolm's biggest mistake was trying to make Elijah Muhammad out to be this Messiah-like figure. And that's one of the biggest problems that I feel like we do every time. We take our leaders and we put them up on pedestals and we act like they can't fall from grace. And that's why I always say, when we look at current celebrities today in the media, how they've had these large followings and how they've had this fandom for a long time. And then when they do something, we find out they do something very despicable behind closed doors. People are like, oh man, I can't believe he was my idol. I felt that way several times. Nobody wants to criticize that individual for having flaws. They can't believe that that person has flaws. But Obama has plenty of flaws. And the media doesn't want to talk about that. And one of his biggest flaws is how he basically tries to step on fault lines when it comes to race. And what I mean when President Obama became when we knew about President Obama in 2004, everybody said, this man was going to be the president of the United States. He was going to be one of the greatest. He gave the speech at the 2004 convention, and that catapulted him to the presidency of the United States. And even in 2007, when I saw him on TV and he announced his candidacy for president while he was still a young senator, everybody black believed that he would never be president. And people forget that. Hell, I believed it. I'm like, I wasn't trying to vote for Obama back in 08 because I didn't believe he was winnable. And then when he clinched the nomination, that's when everybody black wanted to follow him and not Hillary Clinton. We automatically assumed Hillary Clinton had the black vote, right? And then everything flipped on her because she thought she had black people in her pocket. And this is what I was saying about the Democratic Party when they come into black communities, or you have white people, white Democrats that come into black communities and they want your candidacy. What do? They go to your church, your local church, and they talk to parishioners, and parishioners push that candidate onto you, even though you realize that it's actually illegal for churches to get involved in politics. You don't see that shit. Some people don't think about that. How it is illegal for religious leaders to endorse political candidates because churches are nonprofits. They're a religious organization. You're not supposed to be promoting or endorsing a candidate for president. But oftentimes we see this in the Democratic Party and we say nothing about it. And that's because we as black folks, we're not well versed in politics. And one of the biggest problems with Obama when he was getting elected is that when it comes to the fault lines that he steps on, when it comes to race, it's like race tends to be one of his weakest spots because he tried to deny himself being black. He tried to deny being the first black candidate because he didn't want to be seen that way. And he did numerous interviews where he played down his race in order to get to the presidency. You know, and we saw that, and we sat back and saw that on TV, and we seen it everywhere. And everybody says, well, Obama is black, but Obama is biracial. He shares a white mother and a black father, a Kenyan father. But his struggles with race transcended his presidency because when we're talking about Obama, we're talking about somebody that didn't really particularly touch black issues because he didn't want to be seen as the black president. You get what I'm saying? And time again, with all the policy changes that we've had, it was always for the collective. It was never for particular groups. And everybody got an advantage in the Obama presidency besides black folks. And then it's his office in which there were situations where he would use the authority of his presidency to speak out vehemently against gun violence. When it came to Sandy Hook and white people, he spoke out strongly against the gun violence and advocated for gun control legislation. But when Hadia Pendleton got shot, he was silent. And that's the biggest problem. When it comes to black issues, he was silent on that. He tended to have a controlled response. But when it came to white people, when it came to Aurora, then it was the response was different. He went out to Aurora, Colorado when the movie theater shooting happened and spoke out about gun violence. When the Boston bombing happened, he spoke out against that. But then when his second term came, right? When his second term came and Trayvon Martin got shot, he did nothing to speak out against gun violence. And he had, like I said, a controlled response. Remember that. Remember in his second term, it was like, okay, Trayvon Martin got shot. It was a national outcry about problem with police violence. This was the kicking off point of police violence and acknowledging police violence in the United States. But he did nothing to respond to it except, oh, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And that's all he said. He has a history of avoiding black issues. And we never said nothing about it. And black folks sit up here and they never pushed back against criticizing Obama. They never pushed back against what he's done. And that therein lies the problem, because when he got elected, and I'll be honest with you, the first term was really to clean up the Bush years. So that was kind of a wasted term for him, because once he killed Osama bin Laden, that's what led to his second term. He earned a second term. But his focus was on the economy in the first term. And then it shifted in his second term to the issue of gun violence. And then that should have been a national issue, even when, when he responds fervently about gun violence, he takes all these moral platitudes and these moral stances. But then, of course, when there's shootings in Chicago, when there's shootings in Baltimore, New York, Los Angeles, in their inner city neighborhoods, he never talks about that issue. But then, of course, when the Baltimore riots happened, this is where he took a moral stance, and all of a sudden calls young black men that saw Freddie Gray get his spine broken by the police a bunch of thugs. And I remember I was I was a student at Towson at one point, and I was sitting down in the cafeteria, I was watching the news, and they were still talking about the riots, and President Obama came out near the Rose Garden and spoke on the riots. And I remember by that time, when I heard him say what he said about Baltimore, I had lost all respect for him. Because how can you call all of us thugs and you never even came to our city? But then you want to pop up at a rally in Pittsburgh and tell black men that they need to vote for Kamala Harris because, oh, black women have had your back for years, and oh, she went to school with us. And I'm like, I'm supposed to make a decision in 3 months about this person who's only been vice president for 3.5 years and has done nothing to advance any causes of African Americans, and doesn't even want to really speak directly to African American men. But if she knew anything about the brothers and why they feel the way that they feel, I mean, to be honest, she could easily see what the gripes are with African American men. One being the issue of police violence. The issue of unemployment. How most black men aren't able to get decent paying jobs or even own their own homes. Or the fact that many black fathers in our community aren't appreciated or respected for what they do. But you don't see Kamala Harris talking or speaking on that or talking to people. She's just saying, oh, Trump is bad. If Trump gets into office, Project 2025, it's always scare tactics. But can you give me some tangibles that I can vote for you? Nobody should have to sleep in a tent because they can't afford rent. Nobody should have to pay 55 or $5,059,000 for a house, for a 3 bedroom home. Nobody should have to do that. Nobody should have to pay exorbitant amounts of money for groceries. But you don't hear her talking about that. But I'm supposed to turn around and be like, I gotta vote, and Obama sitting up there, I gotta vote for Kamala Harris because she's she's one of you. And this is why I was saying about identity politics and how toxic it has become. A lot of people in the Democratic Party, and like I said, going back to the isms, this this thing about ideological issues, they like to take all this shit, intersectionality, misogyny, sexism, and they like to place it, and they basically place it at the black man's feet. And that's essentially what Obama did with these young men. You chastise them because you assume, because we don't, you don't know what is in another man's mind. And when they go behind the polls and close the curtain, you don't know who they're going to vote for. And I think that's one of the issues that Obama doesn't understand. Now, I don't know who pushed him to say what he said, or whether or not it came from somebody in his family, or whether he was saying it because he's trying to get some cool points with his wife. But it was uncalled for him to say that to a group of young black men whom at one point grew up watching his presidency, and also on top of that, those who actually voted for him in 2008 and didn't see any tangible results with his presidency. And that's one of the biggest issues that I find very troubling. And I feel like maybe a lot of black men have a reason not to vote for Kamala Harris because they're afraid that just because she's the first black woman president, if she does become the first black woman president, not much is going to change. And we getting tired of this whole ideological, having an ideology and making it seem like, well, you're the first person to get this, or you're the first black person, or the first Asian American, or the first this and the first that. And I'm like, first openly gay. Everything with the Democratic Party is about breaking some type of fucking barrier. And a lot of people, black and white, are kind of over it. It's getting tiring. It's like, look, I just want a normal life. Nobody should have to work. And if you really want to speak to the real concerns of Americans, it's like, look, nobody should have to work 2 fucking jobs just to pay for rent. Nobody should have to sleep in homelessness or get evicted from their apartments because their rent is is not capped. Nobody should have to do that. And you don't see these political candidates speaking to those real concerns. And that's one of the primary reasons I didn't vote for neither Trump nor Kamala Harris. Because, to be honest, why would I vote for somebody that says we can't fix all the ills of society, but you can fix and send weapons to another foreign country, tens of billions of dollars, but you don't have money to take care of the average citizen in your own country? And that's what the issue is with why she doesn't have the turnout that her other Democratic candidates had, because people are tired. If you do a temperature check in the United States, people say the economy is not doing well, and it isn't. You see all these expensive cities, nobody can afford to live in San Francisco. People are destitute, rent is sky high. It's becoming harder and harder to make ends meet in this country. And one of the biggest problems that I find is that anybody, and this is speaking for Kamala Harris, because she comes out of California. California is super liberal. Everything in California is failing right now. Nobody can afford California. And nobody can afford to live there, so they move and they relocate. People can't afford New York City. And Chicago right now, as we speak, is in a deficit, a $900 million deficit. So all these northern cities and these American cities where they're progressive, all of them are falling apart down ballot. Where, you know, what does it say if Kamala Harris comes into office and she's taking policies from where she lives and where she's from and transfers it all over the country? America might start looking like San Francisco, if you really honestly think about it. You got all this stuff going on. People are really tired. Hell, I'm tired. I'm tired of turning on the TV and watching people shoplift. These side shows where people are sitting around doing donuts, damaging other people's cars. Juveniles who don't know how to act right when they're out in public. The massive amounts of shoplifting and criminality that have gone on since the pandemic. Nobody wants America to be like that. I sure as hell don't. I get tired of seeing that shit. And that's why people are tired of the Democratic Party. Because on one side, they let the pendulum swing a little too far out of place instead of keeping a balance. And that's one of the biggest flaws about this party. there has to be some type of balance in conservatism and in liberalism. Try to meet people down the middle, but we don't see that. It's just total chaos right now. You know, the vandalism, the protesting, people on campus who ain't getting a real education, sitting around damaging $1 million dormitories and ripping up statues, call them genocide, and you know, just totally, completely out of whack. And I know I don't want to be a part of that shit because I was raised different. I was raised with some common sense. And that's one of the things that the Democratic Party and people like Obama don't understand. Have to have some type of common sense. Before we even think about voting for somebody like Kamala Harris, she has to come with some type of tangibles in order for us as black men to really consider voting for her. And even if she does dole out some policies, they get these lofty ideas and these lofty goals and they can't deliver on anything. That's the same thing with President Obama in a sense. Like he made all these lofty goals, and out of all of that, he was able to deliver on universal health care. But when you think about all the other policies, the rollout of universal health care was a failure. You know, and there was a lot of issues. And I think right now, with the way that the economy is beginning to slip, we're going to see more and more people kind of turn away from the Democratic Party. Last thing we want is to vote a political candidate in who's advocating for supporting a war or a conflict overseas. We don't want to go through another 20 years of that shit. So these are real general concerns that people are talking about on street corners every day. And I can't fathom having 4 more years of the same shit. Because the more we think about it, the more it gets more fucking expensive as time goes by. It seems like it just moving the goalposts from one spectrum to the next, and it just seems like that. And it's been like that for the last 10 years. Even when I was in school during the Obama era, I struggled for a long time to find a decent paying job. I couldn't even get a fucking internship. I called around. I went to DC. People even wanted me to pay for an internship, $10,000 for a fucking internship. And I'm like, it shit didn't really make sense. And even when I was in college, they kept on telling me, well, you know, if you want to get a job, a real job, you gotta do 3 or 4 or 5 internships. And I'm like, who the fuck got time to do 3, 5 internships? It was that stupid shit that was happening in the Obama era where people were getting all these internships, people getting free labor out of other unsuspecting college students, hoping that they would get a job soon. And some of it never fucking worked. And that's what's so problematic. None of the shit worked. That's one reason why this economy hasn't been good for anybody. They say the jobs are doing good and you got a good economy, but then what the fuck type of jobs are we getting? Jobs that's like 14, 15 an hour can't pay close to shit. $2,000 a month. How the fuck are you going to be able to pay for rent? Well, rent is almost $1,800 or $1,100 a month. You'd have to fucking live with somebody in order to afford that fucking apartment or one bedroom or a studio. This shit is ridiculous. I remember when I was younger, and this was in the 90s, where apartments were like $895 a month. That's how much apartments were back in 1996, 1997. Then they went to 1,000 in 2001. Just started creeping up and up and up. Now the average apartment in America is almost $1,800 for a studio. But you got people working at Target and Walmart only making $2,000 a paycheck. Not making any real fucking money. And that's one of the biggest troubles about this president. And this was scary. Like, how are we going to bring down the cost of living so that normal Americans can work? But with Obama chastising black men, it's not going to help Kamala get in the office faster. I mean, how you trying to? It's kind of like you trying to make a half court shot, and I feel like these candidates are trying to make Hail Marys in a tight race. You're trying to throw the ball half court, hoping and closing your eyes, hoping that it gets into the hoop before the buzzer buzzes. And it's crazy. It's crazy. I know a half court shot when I see one. And right now, this election is looking like a half court shot, a shot in the dark. But this has been another episode of Media Talks TV. Be sure to subscribe and check us out. Got another video coming up soon. I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. I'm tired. See y'all later. Peace.